Shalom all! I'm so glad to share that I'm finally back home, and thank you all for the prayers and messages and support. It was a long trip to Europe, much longer than expected, in fact twice as long as expected, and I'm very glad to finally be back home with my children and here at the office. So, let's go over a few points from the last week or so. And actually, it will really all be about this ceasefire negotiation, and we can expand on issues in the future based on what happens. As always, current events push back other stuff. So, as mentioned, the biggest item of news is this suggested agreement between Israel and the Hamas. So let's go over it. After the 12-day war with Iran ended, for now, Trump said that Gaza war is next and it needs to end, and talk about ending it will come in the following week, 2 weeks, and so on and so forth. So there's been a few weeks of talking, and since then we're back to a slightly amended version of the Witkoff suggestion, which supposedly Israel already agreed to in the past and Hamas rejected, and now Israel has once again agreed to it, and Hamas has responded positively, but with some changes that they would like to make that Israel has not agreed to. So let's start. Here is the current proposed agreement based on a report from the Saudi magazine Al-Majle. So, number 1, a cessation of hostilities will be for the duration of 60 days, and President Trump will guarantee the ceasefire. Point 2, a total of 10 living hostages and 18 dead corpses of hostages will be released and returned according to the following timetable. On day 1, 8 living hostages will be released. On day 7, the corpses of 5 dead hostages will be returned. On day 30, the corpses of 5 dead hostages will be returned. On day 50, 2 living hostages will be released, and on day 60, the corpses of 8 dead hostages will be returned. Point 3, humanitarian aid. Humanitarian aid will enter Gaza immediately based on a separate agreement regarding aid for the civilian population, and it will take place throughout all 60 days of the ceasefire, and it will include an obligation for increased quantities based on the January 19th agreement. The aid will be distributed through the accepted channels, including the Red Crescent and the United Nations. Point 4. Offensive actions by the IDF will halt as soon as the ceasefire takes effect. During the ceasefire, aerial reconnaissance will be restricted to 14 hours most days and 12 hours on days when hostages are being released or corpses returned. Point 5. Redeployment of the IDF positions. On day 1, after release of the hostages, the IDF will reposition in the northern strip and the Netzarim corridor based on predetermined maps and the requirements for the delivery of humanitarian aid. On day 7, after the return of the corpses of our hostages, there will be a repositioning in the southern part of the Gaza Strip based on predetermined maps and the requirements for the delivery of humanitarian aid. During the ceasefire, technical teams will work to determine in an expedited negotiation final redeployment positions. Point 6. Negotiations. Already on day 1, negotiations will start under the guidance of the Arab guaranteeing countries, that is Qatar and Egypt, regarding the arrangements for a permanent ceasefire that will include the principles and conditions to release all the remaining hostages and corpses and how many prisoners will be exchanged for them. Issues dealing with redeployment, withdrawal of IDF forces, and long-term security concerns. Arrangements regarding the quote-unquote day after in Gaza will be suggested by both sides, and a declaration of a permanent ceasefire. Point 7. President Trump is serious and supports the obligation of both sides to reach a ceasefire and insists that if the negotiation during the 60 days is successful, it will lead to a permanent end for the Hamas-Israel conflict. That's a bold statement, if it's relevant in any way. Anyways, point 8, release of Arab prisoners. In exchange for the hostages and corpses, Israel will release a number of Arab prisoners that will be agreed upon. Odd that that number is not yet known, and I suspect that it in fact is, but in order to avoid Israeli popular opposition, it is being kept secret. In any case, the exchange will be done in an agreed upon manner and without public fanfare, also known as the blood circuses that we saw before. Point 9, the status of hostages. On day 10, Hamas will pass along full information with proof of life and medical records, or proof of death, for each of the hostages remaining. And following that, Israel will pass along information on all the Arabs taken prisoner since October 7th, as well as the number of dead Gazans that are currently held by Israel. Hamas will promise to guarantee the well-being and safety of the hostages during the 60-day ceasefire. Point 10. Within 60 days, the negotiation for the release of the remaining hostages and corpses should be concluded. And if so, they will be released immediately. If not, an extension of the ceasefire, see point 11, can be done. To me, this point seems rather pointless or useless, because it kind of says, if we reach an agreement, it will happen, and if we don't, we can continue negotiating. But oh well, that's just my opinion. Point 11. The guaranteeing countries, USA, Egypt, and Qatar, will guarantee that the ceasefire will last 60 days and they operate and control, such as UNRWA, and not to allow the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, to continue its work. And why do they want that? Well, of course, because it allows them to keep enriching themselves and the war to keep going, as well as to continue to control the population. The second point that Hamas wants is they want the ceasefire period to be longer than 60 days automatically, whether the negotiations are successful or not. And the third point that they want is a much bigger IDF withdrawal than the one in the proposal. Israel, according to the Ma'ariv newspaper, has already responded and rejected Hamas's proposed changes. But despite that, a negotiating team was scheduled to go to Qatar to continue negotiating this ceasefire proposal. Now, there's a lot more that we can talk about, such as Syria and Marco Rubio's proposal that Mahmoud Ashara al-Jolani attend the UN convention in September, or about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and the American workers of it that were wounded by Hamas, and so on and so forth. But for now, I think this is enough. So I'd like to have a shout out and prayers for the tragedy in Texas, where dozens were killed and 20 are still missing from massive flooding. And shalom, and God bless you all. Finally, back in Jerusalem.